From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
Our friend Noel is on adventures, but will be returning in the future. They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. Matt, this is a wide-ranging episode for us today, isn't it?
It is, but it brings in topics that we've been covering over the past 7 years.
Are we 7?
Believe it or not. I think almost 7. In this year, we will become 7. But yeah, we've hit on a lot of the topics that we're going to kind of pull in here. So hopefully you've listened to many of the episodes. If not, maybe go back, check out some of the ones that you can kind of infer that we're going to be talking about with this topic, as you've read in the title, and then come back to this episode. Because we are going to be pulling in a lot of stuff, and we're not going to have time to hit everything in complete detail.
Mm-hmm. And this wide-ranging episode is also by its nature collaborative, as we of course hope all of our episodes are, because we need your help. We want your involvement. As we often say, you, specifically you, are the most important part of this show. Those are not empty words. As a matter of fact, to prove that these are not empty words, to put our money where our mouths are, or where your ears are as you listen to this. Matt, I checked on our Twitter, at Conspiracy Stuff on Twitter. I checked on our Twitter feed, and I had no idea that we have more people befriending us on Twitter than I thought.
Yeah.
Not a big number.
It's a big number
in absolute terms, but it was bigger than I thought it was.
For us, it's a big number. You want me to say what it is exactly?
Yeah, where are we at?
According to the mobile version, we have 29,200 something followers.
Holy smokes! Well,
we don't consider you followers, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
That's an awful word.
You are our fellow conspiracy realists. You're our fellow listeners. So we thought we would give some of you a quick shout out at the top of the show. And we hope that the people we shout out are listening, but we want to share what they said with you, especially for those of us who are not on Twitter. So unless everybody hates this, we're going to make this a regular thing. Here we go. We'll just read a few. Shout out to Shoopda1, Stuart Hopfer, over there on Twitter, who's responding to our recent coronavirus episode. We do have an update coming. And Stuart, you said, I listened to this episode and there's something you should have mentioned. Aside from wearing a mask to not get sick or catching something, they have also been warned for those who have not done their makeup. Which
really,
which I thought was interesting. Yeah. So maybe you're in a hurry and you feel like you should have, as they say, put on your face, but you didn't have time. So you say, I'll slap on the mask. I'm just running to the store.
Yeah.
It's interesting, huh?
It really is. I never would have thought about that.
And so here's another one. Patrick Lee 6669 was responding to our earlier tangent about ridiculous DC villains.
Yes.
And he hipped us to this fantastic Batman villain, Ten-Eyed Man. Patrick just said, look him up.
Ten-Eyed Man?
Yeah. He's got, his thing is that his only superpower is that he wears a headband over where the rest of us normals would have eyes. And his eyes, the Ten-Eyed Man's eyes, are on the tips of his fingertips.
What? What?
They're on his, not tips of his fingertips is redundant, but they're on his fingertips.
Oh, so we're talking about Philip Reardon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've seen the costume that has eyes going down his chest.
Yeah, those are decorative, though. His real power is in the fingertips.
Oh, man. This is really cool. He's in the Batverse.
Yeah. He's up there with the Joker, I assume, as the most powerful of Batman's villains. And last one for today, last Twitter shout out for today is RNGen311 says, have you all heard of and watched the documentary Active Measures on Hulu? My tinfoil hat is on and conspiracies are afoot. Check it out if you get a chance. Folks, let us know if you've seen Active Measures. I have not. Let us know if it's worth a while for your fellow listeners. And thanks to you guys, thanks to everyone who has befriended us on Twitter and joined the ranks of the Conspiracy Realist. Again, we are at Conspiracy Stuff. If you ever want to just shoot off a quick tweet to us while you're hearing something, this episode may get a little personal for people. I know it's full confession, a little bit personal for me. Matt, as you pointed out earlier, today's episode is a gestalt. It's cumulative. It's going to trend a bit toward the philosophical, but we've based it on some pretty hard and at times sobering science. As you said, in the past, we've explored specific, concrete examples of things like resource extraction. That's where a state actor or a corporation or state-sponsored corporation goes into usually a developing country and purposefully keeps the people broke while taking things like their lithium or their cobalt or their sugar or their cocoa bean production.
Yeah, and the more recent modern version of that is exactly what you said up top there. The minerals, the things that are needed to produce technologies.
Right, the rare earth elements, right? The rare earth metals. So we've also looked at global health crises such as the idea of a superbug, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to you, livestock industry. Thanks for making antibiotics useless.
And also shout out to Seattle right now, who recently had to close down schools because of the COVID-19
Got to get in front of it. Yeah.
And here where we are in Atlanta, Fulton County is experiencing the beginnings of an outbreak.
Yeah. I mean, the outbreak is already happening.
Yes, but we're actually seeing it, right? We're actually seeing the numbers beginning to rise as they do in a localized area.
Right, exactly. It's starting to hit home, and we're seeing actions being taken. We've also looked at unethical corporate or state behavior, tale as old as time. We've looked at overpopulation. Is it alarmism? Are we being too sedate in our response to the threats?
We're certainly using too much stuff.
We are certainly using too much stuff. That's right. Today we are combining all of these previous investigations to answer a single damning question. And it's a question that people have racked their brains over for millennia, and it is this: is there enough for everyone? In other words, can this planet support the current human population? And we don't mean just like keep them alive, Matrix style, but we mean give them lives they consider worth living. And this is an enormous and profound question. I mean, after all, for billions of people, this world is a brutal, dangerous place. Life is hard, it is painful, it is often terrifying. And there's only one cold comfort for a lot of people suffering, and that's that the folks on the receiving end of the majority of life's terrors often tend not to live long.
Wow. That's not bleak. That's not bleak at all, Ben.
It is super bleak. It is super bleak. So is there enough for everyone? Here are the facts. Matt, what do we mean when we say everyone right now?
Well, right now, as of Friday, March 6th, 2020 at 11:21 a.m. Eastern Time, there are 7,769,064,744 people. It keeps changing.
It keeps changing, and the clock keeps running up. That's so many people. We cannot. Science proves that it's very difficult for our brains to grok the concept of 1 billion.
Yeah, I can't grok 1 billion.
No, I can't. I have a tough time with that too. And this is a new development, right? The number of, you're laughing because I said grok.
Yeah.
That's a word, right? People use that.
I've never used it, but I enjoy it very much.
I might be in the wrong timeline again. But this is a relatively new development. The number of quote unquote modern human beings on Earth has been pretty small until very, 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 very recently.
Yeah, just 10,000 years ago. Think about that. 10,000 years ago, there might have been no more than a few million people wandering around on the planet, and those populations are going to be pretty far spread. And the 1 billion mark wasn't passed until the 1800s, very early in the 1800s. The 2 billion mark wasn't passed until the 1920s. So we have just exponentially exploded here. And all of us walking around, just because of where we live, because of the cultures in which we live, we want a whole bunch of stuff. Just stuff that we use. A lot of times we throw it away. Sometimes we keep it around for a couple of years until it breaks and then throw it away. Maybe we can recycle it. Maybe we can reuse it in a way, but generally it ends up in the trash. Here's the thing. We all have different ideas of what that stuff should be, like we said, because of that culture. But we only need a few basic things. We only need a few basic things.
Right. It's a conversation that a lot of parents in the crowd have had with their children. A lot of us have had this conversation with our own parents, wherein the adult explains the difference between what you need and what you want. It's never a super fun conversation for the kid, and it's probably not a super fun conversation for the adult. But it's true, Matt. We only need a few basic things. Let's look at it. Here's a question. How much food does one person need? Not want, but need. Turns out people don't actually need a ton of calories to survive every day. According to the U.S. Department of Health, adult males generally require somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 calories per day, so every 24 hours, to maintain their weight. And adult females need around 1,600 to 2,400. Of course, those numbers are super loose, and the concept of gender, is somewhat problematic. But what we're saying is that's the ballpark, somewhere between 1,600 to 3,000, not to gain muscle mass and hulk out, and not to shed a bunch of weight and get svelte enough to wear, your old bell bottoms or something.
Yeah, and it's all the calorie is a measurement of energy, right?
Right.
So it all depends on the output that you're having as well, how much energy you're using. Yeah,
exactly. If you, for instance, have a relatively sedentary existence, you're going to be on the lower end of the caloric scale. And if you have a very physically active existence, then you're going to need more fuel for the fire. Of course, our species is nothing if not durable. People can and do survive long, often harrowing periods deprived of proper nutrition. And, you can bounce back from that, but after a certain point, you will also experience lifelong medical consequences of that. Furthermore, epigenetics proves that the medical consequences of long periods of privation will carry on after you die. They'll carry on in your genetic code and the way it expresses in your offspring.
And there is also the concept here that occurs in this country and many other places across the world where you are hitting or exceeding those calories that you need, but the nutrition of those calories is not what you need, right? You're not actually getting the things within the food you're consuming to make a healthy body.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we've got that number. So there are almost 7.8 billion people. They need somewhere between 1,600 and 3,000 calories every 24 hours just for things to be status quo. How much does the world eat? This is interesting. This is a related question.
This is crazy.
Yeah, globally, every 60 seconds, we eat 11.5 million pounds of food. That's everybody. That's our collective tab at the buffet of the world.
1 minute, 11.5 million.
So to put that in terms we understand, I think you and I were talking about this on a previous episode, how people in the U.S. will make up any kind of measurement to avoid using the metric system.
Yes.
Okay, so to put that in terms we can understand, that's about 20 million Big Macs every 60 seconds.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So if you love Big Macs, that's the metric for you. If you hate them, well, that'll just make the rest of the bad news we're going to get to even more harrowing. So here's the catch. While we actually eat that 11.5 million pounds of food in 1 minute, we also waste 2,472 tons.
Dude, I'm looking at the World Food Clock right now that has all of this, how much is produced, consumed, and wasted. And the food clock counts up every second of those three metrics.
Yeah.
I'm like, I hate it. I'm terrified. I'm staring at it while you're telling me these facts, Ben, and my brain is exploding a little bit.
It's crazy. Oh, and just to get us into more of an apples to apples comparison there, 11.5 million pounds, that's like 5,133 tons. And that doesn't count the 2,472 tons that are just straight in the garbage can. So logically then, if we were more efficient, this means that we could feed everyone. We could feed everyone every day. We just don't. There's other stuff to get into there that we're going to talk about later. Yes.
About why we currently can't or won't.
Yes.
But let's continue.
Why it's not happening, even though it's possible. Yeah. So I want to bracket to the side the problem with water, with potable or drinkable water. It's a different case, unfortunately. It's one we're going to have to tackle in an episode all its own because, spoiler alert, while the news about food does have a happy ending, the news about water doesn't really. More than 2 billion people of the 7.8 billion people here on Earth lack clean drinking water at home available on demand, meaning of the 7.8 billion, more than 2 billion don't have a faucet they can go to in their house that just turns on and gives them water that won't kill them. A major UN report from back in 2018 in June shows that the world is way off track. The United Nations had a goal, which was to bring safe water and sanitation to everyone on the planet by 2030. We're not going to make that happen. It's the pigeon of potable water has flown the coop. By 2050, in fact, half of the world's population just might not have safe water.
And currently, here's the deal. There are only really two ways to change these numbers, and that is to reduce the number of people that need to have clean drinking water, or is to somehow revolutionize the purification technology, or get this is the third option, get some kind of angel billionaire, trillionaire investor or group of investors to just put the money in to make it happen.
Right. To get some of that billionaire blessing for purification technology. Or if we want to get really space age, we could look into somehow getting non-terrestrial sources of water, right? To farm a comet or something.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm just trying to imagine the cost difference between farming the water from a comet.
I know.
just cleaning some water, making a plant in places where there aren't those plants.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of let's go out and buy water and someone say, no, we have water at home. Just clean it, right? Yeah. So I like that you brought up money because we need to just touch on that. The average income. So we have these billions of people. What does the average person take home? This is a tricky question, and there's no way to really contextualize it and do justice to the reality on the ground because we have to remember there are vast amounts of income inequality. But if we total up all of the available information, then we find the average global household income is something like $9,773 per year. So a little under 10 grand per household per year. A lot of people listening in the West already make more than that on their own. And a lot of people do not. And then, of course, we have to remember that number factors in people like Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So that guy is busting the curve for everyone.
And then a lot of almost or very close to zero.
Right. A ton of that. Yes. And those results come from some Gallup research between 2006 and 2012 in 131 populations. Here's how screwed up that metric is. Income in the top 10 wealthiest populations in the world are more than 50 times that of those in the 10 poorest populations. And all of the 10 poorest populations are currently located in sub-Saharan Africa. So we hit money, we hit water, we hit food, and now we have to confront the big the big elephantine grim reaper in the room, which is mortality. And we'll do that after a word from our sponsor.
All right. So we have all of these people. We have all of these needs. By the way, we also need love. And that's really all you need.
That's what the Beatles would
according
say.
to the Beatles, yeah. Let's look at how we are exiting this planet, exiting this experience that we call life. In 2017, as of officially 3 years ago, 56 million people died that year. And the top three causes were cardiovascular disease. There were 17.65 million deaths due to cardiovascular disease. And that represents 32.26% of all the deaths. And then cancers came in second. There were 8.93 million deaths that were caused by cancer, or at least in some way associated with cancer. And the share of deaths there is 16.32%. And then next up is respiratory disease, coming in at 3.54 million deaths, and that is 6.48% of all of the deaths. So health issues here, major health issues with our bodies and how they function.
Yeah, and we have to note those top three causes of death are umbrella terms. Cardiovascular disease encompasses several different conditions. Not all cancers are created equally, of course, and so on and so on. And equitable access to medical care would vastly reduce these numbers, as would preventative measures like tighter pollution controls and the like. When we look at shelter and clothing, we know that one man's shack is another man's castle, or however you want to trot out that old cliche. There's clearly enough. There's clearly enough around. Given that shelter can be built out of so many things.
Yes,
there's clearly enough there to create housing for people. I mean, in a lot of developed countries, even there's still a huge homeless problem, and there are a lot of empty buildings. But the homeless population is not allowed to take shelter in there because, of course, concerns for crime, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're speaking about shelter, it can be defined really as anything that's going to protect a person from the elements as well as impending danger from some kind of outside force.
Right. And we've had a high look at the numbers then. Right. We've covered some of the basics. These numbers are not perfect, but we see some commonalities. We see that outside of water, outside of clean drinking water, which is a huge necessity, the trend seems to indicate that there is potential for people not to go hungry. There's potential for people not to be homeless, right? And to maybe even collectively have a better quality of life. So with that, let's get to the question, is there enough for everyone? Here's where it gets crazy. The answer is actually yes. And this should not necessarily make anybody happy. This should be troubling that the answer is yes.
This should be very troubling.
Because that answer is yes, then our next immediate question is, well, what gives? Why isn't this happening? Let's look at food. So you've heard stuff about food scarcity. Shout out to people like Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution. The fact of the matter is that right now, the world already produces enough to eat. We actually produce a surplus. This world creates more than 1.5 times enough food to feed literally everyone. That's enough to feed 10 billion people. And 10 billion people, just for a bookmark, is where experts expect the population to peak around 2050. So not that far away. If you're listening to this podcast, the odds are in your favor of being alive when there are 10 billion people around. Or when there are 10, who knows? We'll roll the dice.
We're never going to make it that far.
So there's a problem, though, because that food, when we say just food in general, it's an umbrella term, and as we had discussed earlier, that term encompasses a lot of grain, the staple of the global diet, and the bulk of the grain produced by agribusiness, the bulk of industrially produced grain, goes to feeding livestock in confined feedlots and goes to biofuels, rather than going to the 1 billion starving or food insecure people on the planet. So again, it's not that we can't feed everyone. It's more that we can't feed everyone the kind of food everyone wants.
And we also destroy a lot of those grains that are created in order to control the price of said grains, which means if you could just decide, instead of destroying it or throwing it away or, getting rid of it in that way, and you just used it to feed people for no cost. Well, we're going to get this later. When I say no cost, I just mean you're not actually selling it or anything. You're literally donating it. But in order then to get that grains to the places, to the needy people that would want it, then it costs a lot of money.
Right. And shout out to a previous recent episode on farm subsidies. It is true that a lot of governments pay farmers to not grow food, even when, there are tons of concerns. Listen to that episode for more information. But think about it this way. Let's take it to an individual level. If you knew with certitude that none of those 1 billion people would ever need to starve again, but it meant that you and everyone else you knew would have to change your diet, you could realistically maybe eat meat once a month or once a year or never again. Would you be able to make that trade-off? The problem there is that if we're being realistic, we would not have a way to know everyone else was playing by the rules.
Can you imagine the black meat market?
Oh man, yeah, I've seen there are things about that in sci-fi. When lab grown protein or lab grown meat becomes the normal, then how much will people pay for a real steak?
And then the concentric circles around the black meat market and the red meat market become troubling.
Right. For many of us, this already sounds like a losing proposition. And it's hard to fault people for that. It's something called the tragedy of the commons, which we've mentioned before in this show. The tragedy of the commons essentially is this. It's the idea that there is a public resource that everybody uses. Like if we didn't have agribusiness and you just foraged from everybody in the village foraged from the same field or whatever, and stuff just grew naturally, but you had to take steps to make sure that food grew next year. But why would you? It's not yours. It's just a place you go to and grab food, right? Yeah. And then everybody grabs food, and then it's gone. And then you just you go through this increasing crescendo of passing the blame. You know what I mean? Like, I just ate what I wanted. The problem's never me. It's all these other schmucks. So it's understandable that this would look like an unnecessary cost for us to put on ourselves. Why should I have to punish myself to help a billion people that I will never meet, right? And why should I have to punish myself or hold myself to standards that I cannot prove other people are meeting, you know? So if we look at this is, by the way, this is not taking in medicine. We're putting that to the side because the medical care stuff, like water, is almost its own episode.
Yeah, and again, bringing in costs, the time it takes to train people, and medications that would be affordable to save lives.
All right, so next question then. So we can do this stuff. Technically, potentially, we're not. So why not? Why are we not giving every other human being what they need to survive? Essentially, it's because doing so, even if everybody wanted to, doing so would necessitate a massive transfer of resources and wealth, something that like on the level that it has never occurred in human history. It boggles the mind. And part of it is because of, we're talking about inequality. Up there with mortality, that's the other elephant in the room. And when we talk about inequality, we often tend to think in these extremes, you know, because extremes are easy cognitive shortcuts. We think of the billionaires, for example, on one end of a scale and the hopelessly deprived on the other end of the curve. But honestly, we have to give ourselves perspective. If you own a device that allows you to listen to a podcast, for example, then you are, globally speaking, much more likely to be one of the haves rather than one of the have-nots. A lot of people considered poor in a developed country, for instance, may still have a better quality of life overall than a relatively well-off person in a least developed country. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, then the question becomes, what do we do about that? Again, without having, you know, even if everybody's on board, except for the trillionaires, the billionaires, like how do you get those people, those corporations to decide that it's a better thing for everyone if we raise all ships? Right.
That leads us to another question. You know, what's the solution? Can technology save us? It's something we'll tackle after a word from our sponsor. And we're back. All right, here's one for the budding technocrats in the audience, the people who are very forward to the future, right?
Another question after an ad break. Can technology save us?
Yeah. The answer is yes. Maybe. Let's say the answer is yes, but probably not.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. See, for most of human history, we just didn't have the organization necessary to handle the logistics involved. You might have people in one part of the world who had a surplus of grain because the weather was favorable, and people in a different region, you know, maybe they were combating droughts or floods, and as a result, their harvest didn't come through and they starved. And let's say that the people with the surplus of grain heard about this distant land that needed help. Even if the people with that surplus wanted to feed their fellow humans, even if they tried very hard, for most of human history, they just wouldn't have the means to get the food or medicine or resources to those folks in time to make a difference. Now, for the first time ever, that has changed. We can ship almost anything, almost anywhere.
But it costs money. And it costs money because of fuel, because of the existing technology that can travel. It costs money because you have to have the logistics in place to figure out what is going where. And that's, you know, a bunch of people employed, a lot of times huge facilities
and
to make that stuff happen.
All money is a representation of labor over time, right?
It is.
So we would have to ship stuff. We essentially have to give people these placeholders for time that was spent earlier, right? And we do that in the form of currency. So we have to help these people justify their labor, their time, right? And that is a huge, huge hurdle. But if there was some other thing, not saying that we have an answer, and I'm not even saying there should be some other thing, but if there was, quote unquote, no cost, then we could literally feed every single hungry person on the planet. We're not.
Yeah. So what can we do? Can emerging technology and energy improvements and a lot of these things that are out there that are happening, we know are coming, it's just when will they get here? Will those things move the needle enough to help everyone's ship rise a little bit? Because, there really is interesting stuff out there happening. And one of the big things would be if we could, because it would change everything, if we could get more efficient and larger amounts of power, of energy, because that would reduce the costs of things like shipping. They would reduce the cost of things like packaging and all of these other things we would need. So we were just looking at a couple of different emerging technologies, and we won't spend too much time on this. 2019, according to a lot of the news that has been coming out about energy improvements, 2019 was a year that wasn't too exciting about brand new developments, but there was some really cool stuff in there happening that's more of a minor improvement that you can kind of see the tail of, right? You can see kind of where it's headed. We found something called floating solar, which is really interesting to me, and I hope you find it to be fascinating too. The idea is taking a solar array that you've probably seen pictures of somewhere online, that generally it's in a desert or somewhere or a more arid climate, where you've just got solar panels in a huge circle or a different arrangement that's just out there aiming at the sun at all times, trying to generate electricity. Well, floating solar uses a body of water that isn't usually used for a specific human purpose. So imagine a hydroelectric dam's reservoir. So like the water that's above a hydroelectric dam, that then that water flows down through the dam system and generates electricity through turbines. This floating solar array would sit on top of that reservoir, and it would look kind of like the other solar arrays you've seen before. It's just they're floating on the surface of the water that isn't going to be used anyway.
Right.
The surface isn't.
Right.
Then you can generate a bunch of power there. And the cool thing about this is that because, in this case at least, if it's really close in proximity to a power generation plant already with that hydroelectric dam, it's really easy to transfer the power generated on that floating array to the grid itself, which, as we're going to keep talking about here, that becomes one of the major problems with new energy technologies out there that might give us a bit of a step up when it comes to helping everyone. So another technology that you can think about is offshore wind farms. Mm-hmm. So wind farms that are, relatively far out into the ocean or offshore, and the wind out there can generate energy really effectively. The problem is, if you're far enough away, it becomes extremely difficult to get that power generated because it's so far away from the grid to the grid. Mm-hmm. So there are new technologies coming out about the types of cables and how those cables would function to actually bring more power to the global grid. That seems like a cool thing. There's new nuclear technologies that are emerging, like we talked about with Chris Cogswell. Mm-hmm. There's stuff in there about molten salt reactors, which seem to be a little bit safer than the fission reactors that that are so common right now on the planet. But there's also that concept of fusion that we talked at length with Chris about that really does seem to be happening.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. I was so skeptical when we were initially talking about it. But since then, like smaller fusion reactors are a real thing that seem to be happening. So that could really change the game as far as being able to get either to produce the food that is needed and to clean the water efficiently and put power plants in places that we normally wouldn't even consider doing it if you're a large corporation.
Yeah, and all of the problem is all those technologies that we've named have some
major drawbacks.
Major drawbacks. They have, including stuff like the overhead or the initial costs, safety or environmental concerns, and then problems of scale.
Yeah. Right? Oh, yeah. I mean, none of these things we're talking about are going to change the game, really, in the way we're imagining here. But except for fusion. Fusion could.
It could? Yeah.
I think fusion could.
Yeah. I would love for it to be I would love for that to be the case. Like for any of those things we just named, solar or hydroelectric or fusion, to make it off of the drawing board or to move from the column of potential solutions to practical or implemented solutions. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
And then how on earth do you bring the cost down with something like fusion enough to make it extremely helpful?
There's another, whenever we talk about technology and its possible role in improving the lives of the people who are members of the species, one big thing must be addressed, and that is the concept of what is often called AI or artificial intelligence, or increasingly academics prefer the term machine consciousness, because they say, if a consciousness is a consciousness. How is a machine's consciousness any different, theoretically, from a meathead's consciousness? What makes one artificial and one not? Right?
It's the meat.
It's the meat. That's gonna be our advertisement for premium organic brains in the black meat market. It's the meat. I wish you guys could see the expression Matt had. It's perfect. I nominate you as spokesman.
Oh, I accept.
All right. So before we talk about AI, let me pitch you a little bit on why people are excited about having a non-human consciousness or collective handle these logistical problems, these distribution problems, which is really, that's what a lot of this is. Well, first, no matter what our lovely little primate brains can make technology-wise outside of AI, we may not have the tools mentally to take advantage of this. Our brains, you see, are one of the most important pieces of early human technology. How we got where we are. Our brains, make no mistake, are the reason for all the good stuff the human species has done. They're also the reason for all the bad stuff we've done. It's kind of like Promethean fire, right? So the problem is that our brains, like any other computer, have they've got code and they've got limits to their capabilities. Our brains naturally balk at the idea of deliberately lowering our individual standards to help some abstract collective of billions of other brain computers that we will never, ever, ever, ever meet. Sorry, the odds against you meeting all the people on the planet right now are astronomical, because so many are dying every minute and so many more are being born. You just don't have time for it in your schedule. And even if you're lowering your individual standard of living to something that's survivable, something that's not that bad, something that's not terrible, but just isn't as awesome as you would want, you'll never really see the impact of that on the planet, not in your lifetime. And our brains already knew this way before we did, which brings us to one of the chilling theories that is, I don't know about you, Matt, but it's sort of changed the way I look at the world.
Okay.
It's something called Dunbar's number.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which we've mentioned before. It's named after a British anthropologist named Robin Dunbar. Long story short, Dunbar is convinced through his research that there is a ratio, a correlation between brain size in primates and the amount of people a given primate can consider other people or other primates, living, thinking, feeling beings with their own motivations, their own goals. That number for human beings, according to Dunbar, is 150 people, ballpark. That means then that once you get to like 152 people, 2 of those aren't people. They're just sort of functions. They happen. You know what I mean?
They're bots.
Yeah, right. They're verbs. They're mechanisms. They're processes that you see moving around you, but you don't think of them as people.
I'm imagining it as a social media thing. Let's just say, let's use Facebook. You've got 150 Facebook friends, and you know all of them.
Right.
You really, truly know all those people. And then that number starts to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And now it's just kind of a picture of a representation of a human with each of those profiles.
Yeah. And you do that obnoxious thing people do on social media where you don't really care it's someone's birthday, but you get a notification. So you pop a HBD over there because God knows you don't have time to write both of those words out, right?
That's right.
So the problem then is, if Dunbar's theory is correct, the problem is less one of material goods or resource availability, and it is more one of our inherent neurological wiring, our hardwired inability to think that humanity, as we understand it, really exists past a certain threshold of about 150 people.
But in your experiment here, Ben, we're talking about allowing some extremely sophisticated computer system to decide who's going to get fed when and with what.
Wait. I just want to hit this though.
Okay.
From what I was saying, if Dunbar's theory is true, then that means that all other things aside, including the most popular ideology of this age, or the most popular religion, which would be economy, money, currency, things like that, that means that we are the biggest obstacle to our own success. The problem isn't how much food is being grown. The problem is us. You know what I mean? And yes, I see where you're going, where it gets a perfect setup. Do we then eschew our individual and species-wide responsibility? Do we build a better brain and just trust it? Some kind of Skynet, some kind of technological god made of ones and zeros that will tell us where the cantaloupe is supposed to go every harvest? For many people, that is a troubling thing, because then we're consigning our entire species' existence to be the children of something else that we've created. You know what I mean? And then we have to also say we would blindly trust this thing, and we would, no matter what kind of system we put in place to watch the watchman, as it were, we would have very little recourse. You know, once you hop on that wagon, once you hop on that train, there's not really an easy way to get off because of the power you would have to give that sort of mind. Yeah,
well, I'm on board.
You're on board.
Yeah, let's call it mana. It'll be the mana system on the Gaia grid, and it'll just send all the food and water resources necessary to the entire globe that needs them, no matter where they're produced and at what time. It'll calculate like when foods will spoil and how far they can actually travel. Oh, it's going to be incredible.
Mega algorithmic network assignment. I don't know.
That's pretty good.
No, I mean, it's good for a 1960s short story, but
yeah, there maybe there's automation in there, or what's another really good not an android, assistant. No.
Oh yeah. Massive artificial neural algorithm.
That's pretty good.
I don't know.
I was just thinking more of the symbolism of the mana from the gods. That it just drops from the drones.
Oh, I love the name. Let me be clear about that. I am 100% on board. I think mana is the way to go because we want something that sounds non-threatening, right?
Yeah.
But of course, you can see how people wouldn't trust that, because for many people, the existence of something like that would not be a positive addition to their immediate lives. Sure, it would probably mean that within 5 or 6 generations, your descendants would live in a world that was environmentally better off, right? And it means that overall, within several generations, people in general would be okay. But for you, buddy, when the manna starts falling, that's going to mean that your quality of life takes a definite and observable hit. And you're just going to have to trust, like, oh, there's something bigger than me and bigger than manna. And it is this tremendously controversial fad called human existence. And
you know what we'd end up doing if we did actually get that system in place? We would increase that world population clock. It would go up a lot faster.
Oh, yeah.
Because the deaths would happen at a much smaller rate if everybody had what they needed. And then overpopulation actually, truly, for real becomes a problem.
Yeah. And all the Malthusians are able to resurrect their old beliefs. And then furthermore, of course, we're ascribing benevolence to something like this, some kind of creation like this. But the big question is, if it's solving the problem the most logical way, then the easiest, most efficient answer to making life better for the existing population would be to reduce the size of the existing population. And then the survivors would not have to take a huge hit on their quality of life, and the survivors would actually tend to have a better quality of life depending on the size of the population you left over if you were manna.
Oh, it's just, the old artificial intelligence culling that we've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right? I check the world clock every day, just for a heads up.
Oh, whoa, that number's a lot lower than it should be.
I have these feverish moments where I think one day I'll check the world clock and I'll find out that something terrible has happened because it starts going down.
Yeah, wow.
But of course, that wouldn't really work because it's based on these estimates that are based on studies that were conducted years in the past.
Have you seen, I think we talked about it before, you seen that movie that was available on Netflix a little while ago called Mother?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or I Am Mother? No, what was it called? It was the one about the AI system, not the Aronofsky one.
Right, but it's the one about the machine consciousness that is raising a daughter.
Yes.
Who is human.
Yes. Ooh, man. It's manna at work there.
It is manna at work. It very much is. Well, there we have it. Turns out there is enough food and potential shelter for every single human being living on this planet. Water is a different thing. We still see people dying from starvation, poor diet, disease, lack of shelter, and more and more and more. Why? Because there's several problems. First, the existing systems that we came up with over thousands and thousands of years, they were just not built to accommodate a population of this size. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like a lemonade stand is not meant to be an industrial lemonade factory. As a matter of fact, most kids who start a lemonade stand never think this should be an operation where I can feed, or give 10 times the amount of people the lemonade that I was making for maybe 20 people a day. That's just the facts. Now, we can make better systems maybe, but second, related to this problem, we have just now begun. This is an exciting time to be alive. We have just now begun to create global supply systems capable of addressing the labyrinthine logistics needed to feed and house everyone. And that's not even counting how to keep those people from getting sick. That's just making sure they have somewhere to sleep and enough to eat. And third, forget all the fancy agricultural improvements, all the hypothetical stuff that we're talking about today. Our brains themselves are old technology. Our brains are arguably obsolete, and we still don't fully understand them. We literally do not have the physiological capacity to understand the size of the human population, nor do we have the ability to think of this population in terms of individuals. We have a limit hardwired to our empathy and cognition. So after about 150 or so people, you, me, everyone you know, cannot conceive of others as actual feeling, thinking human beings. Do you feel pity for a maple tree growing somewhere in Missouri and a specific coordinate? No. Why would you? You know the idea of a maple tree, but you don't know that one.
Yeah.
And why? So how is a human being by that maple tree any different from the tree? It's not a human being to you.
Yeah. I don't know about this Dunbar guy.
No? You think he's poisoning the well a bit?
It feels like a very pessimistic view of our brains and our capacity for empathy.
Technically still a theory.
I know. I think inside of us there is more capacity for it. But I understand the concept.
Well, okay. Think about this then in more concrete terms and more microcosmic terms. Happiness, as we understand it, is kind of relative. You might ask yourself, how can a person making $12 an hour be happier than someone making $50 an hour, for example? Well, first off, happiness is not entirely based on finance. We understand that. But if we look at that example, we find that if someone is making $12 an hour, they'll tend to be happier with their income so long as they know all their colleagues are making less, all the other people who work with them, even if it's just a little less. If you make $12 an hour and you work somewhere where you know for a fact everybody else makes $11.50 an hour, just that 50 cents will tend to make you happier. However, let's go to our person making $50 an hour. They'll be irritated. They'll be PO'd. They'll be unhappy if they make $50 an hour and they know their colleagues are making just a little more, just like $55 an hour. They'll be incensed. There's no justice in this bleak and uncaring, godless universe.
This feels very relative, but I guess it is. That's kind of the point here.
And then they will completely they will tend to not really identify with the person making $12 an hour in the office across town. So it seems that a refined appreciation of inequality then is inherent to our existence. And probably back in our just out of the trees running around the savannah days, that was very beneficial to our species. So for some reason, we humans tend to think of success less in terms of having quote unquote enough and more in terms of having more than other people. Or like, I am successful because other people have less than me. Or if we want to do it a half full way, I am successful because it could be worse. I am better off than I could be. And shifting away from this concept, make no mistake, would be a fundamental change. This is the question that bothers me, man. Were we to overcome this hurdle, would we still be human beings? Would we still be the same species?
If we were no longer jealous of each other's finances?
If finances, yeah.
And but more or less.
Niche into that, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so.
If we were capable of describing success and happiness in just terms of how am I doing? Am I okay? Do I have enough? Instead of how am I doing? Am I doing better than other people? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that exists in a lot of people right now, especially people who don't have much.
I believe so.
I think what we're talking about here is really describing the person that's making $50 an hour, who's already experienced that a little bit of knowing what having a lot is. To me, that's what I'm hearing, but I don't know if that's true. That's
interesting because we didn't talk about that yet. Maybe it's a story for another day, but studies also show that people who have, if we want to keep it in the realm of finance, people who have lower incomes or lower on the socioeconomic scale tend to contribute to charities. They tend to contribute a larger proportion of their income than the quote-unquote haves.
Yeah, we did that whole episode on how wealth makes you a bad person.
Which I went back and re-listened to it.
Yeah.
And I was hoping things would have changed. They haven't. I think we nailed it. the conclusion of that one, spoiler, which still holds up and is worth listening to, is that our personal opinions aside, because science doesn't care about those, multiple studies prove that people tend to behave, quote unquote, worse the higher they go up a certain financial scale.
Yeah.
And again, we're not saying that it automatically makes you bad, any of that stuff. We're just saying multiple studies prove people tend to behave in a less cool manner.
There we go. That's a good way to put it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I guess the question now is like, how, like, okay, it's a personal question.
Mm-hmm.
It's aimed at you. How much would you give up if you knew that by giving up something of yours, others would be better off and would be safe and would survive and would have more happiness? How much would you be willing to give up? Mm-hmm. And that's a tough question to answer, because I think every single person here thinks or knows rather that they have responsibilities in their life. They have, maybe a family, maybe a friend group or a community that they are supporting, that they're doing their best to do that. And then imagining giving up more, it's probably a difficult thing to pose to somebody to think about, even. Especially
for instance, you have no way of proving that effort would be reciprocated, which is the case. It is fundamentally the case. And then furthermore, we're not talking about people giving up stuff that was just given to them. People have worked hard. They have put in blood, sweat, tears, and time.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're saying, hey, give it up for someone you don't know. And then just trust us, says Manna. It'll all work out. Or in the case of Manna, it would just be a mandated thing. But yeah, we want to know, is some sort of benevolent machine consciousness our only hope? Can humans get the band back together and put out a more successful album in our long discography of existence? Boy, that was a terrible.
That's pretty good.
I don't know, man. We're working live. But let us know. We want to hear from you. As we said at the top of the show, you can tell us your opinion on this on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're Conspiracy Stuff on Twitter. We love to recommend our Facebook community page. Here's where it gets crazy. I am going to say, again, that there is a huge chasm between what is possible and what is plausible. So it is possible to improve the lives of people on the planet, of everyone on the planet. Is it plausible? I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think we're there yet.
I think we will be there, but it's going to take a global catastrophe.
And then that'll get us to that kind of Star Trek post-scarcity.
Where there's a threat to the species at large. And there kind of is one, guys. It's called global climate change.
Oh, but you're talking about something more Hollywood friendly, right?
I am talking Hollywood friendly. I'm talking
a little bit of blue beam.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean blue beam. I just mean if there is enough of a threat to the species at large, I think preserving each and every individual will become paramount, and then these kinds of changes will occur.
Right.
Because they'll have to.
And the size of the problem will be smaller too.
Yeah.
So
By the way, there's a global pandemic, maybe pandemic occurring right now.
Yeah, but again, to our earlier conversation, I feel like it's a battle of semantics with pandemic. You know what I mean?
I know.
The official definition is not going to change the way an infection ravages a body. Maybe. I don't know.
How about the numerous, very troubling outbreaks occurring across the planet?
Yeah, maybe that'll be what it takes. Maybe that'll be the big kickstart we need, right?
It'll be zombies.
Zombies?
Or, aliens.
I would say, yeah, or a huge natural disaster, non-terrestrial disaster. Well, Matt, it happened. We once again started talking about the end of the world as we know it.
And stuff is bleak.
Well, hey, here's a question that's probably on everybody's mind as we reach the end of today's show. How can they tell us their take on whether there's enough for everyone? If like I have an opinion about this, for instance, but I hate using social media. How do I get in contact with you guys?
You can call us. Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. Give us a call. Tell us what you think. You might end up on an episode, but one way or another, we're going to hear what you are saying, and that is either a good thing or a bad thing for you. But we're excited to hear your opinions, your jokes, your ideas for episodes, whatever you want to tell us. Give us a call. You can call in just like this person did last night.
Hi there. This is Jade from Spokane, Washington. I was just reflecting on your guys' recent episode about the coronavirus. And I live in Spokane, obviously, and I live about a quarter mile away from a hospital where they have taken, I think, 5, maybe more patients that have been infected with the coronavirus and are holding them at that hospital because it's one of 10 in the U.S. But ever since that was announced, I have seen at least 2 helicopters a day come in and out, and it'll be at random times of night. And I'm not so sure that those are legit helicopters.
Not sure what you mean there.
Interesting.
Yeah. Who's controlling them? Like, what is the company, basically?
And what is their purpose? Yeah. It's thank you, first off, for calling in with this on-the-ground news. We need primary sources. As we know, our coronavirus episode, we went back and forth. We felt it was important to make this episode, and we knew that because we were in the nascent stages of the development of the infection, we would have to come and do an update. So we need your help with this, especially if you have on-the-ground experience. The sad truth of the matter here, and the dangerous truth of the matter, is that given the way the U.S. has currently handled COVID-19, there are easily thousands of undiagnosed cases around, and I would not be surprised at all if the official messaging we're getting does not match the actual activities that governments or states are taking to stave off the infection.
Yes. I know, I do. I agree with that. It is one of those things that is still making me nervous. My news feed is just filled with updates about new clusters of infections, and it's giving me nightmares. But thank you for calling in with information from a specific area. Feel free to call back again with any kind of update. You in particular, I believe Jade is what you said. And anyone else, please call in, leave a message. And if you don't want to do that, please send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.